Hello, everybody, and welcome to lesson 3 of class. This one is called Seeing in Between. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, I want to first recap on lessons 1 and 2. In lessons 1, I talked about perspective and perception. In lessons 2, and so on and so forth, I also mentioned the X and X and the X and Y chromosomes. I'll get into that in a second. And then I want to tap on masculine energy and feminine energy right now because this will help us understand the X and X and the X and Y chromosomes. So the chromosomes is one thing. And if you're using a sports analogy, the X and X could be 2 strikes against you if you're playing baseball. And then, maybe you bunted and now you have a foul, so you get to move on. That's the X and Y. And the reason why I state that is because in scripture, when the man got in trouble, it was his job to now plow the field and do work to provide for the family or the woman that came into his life or the significant other partner that was in their life. Now, when I'm tapping on masculine and feminine energy, here's the thing. It's the masculine energy that normally goes out and does the plowing, yes or no? Because if somebody has a higher level of feminine energy, then it's going to force the masculine, but it's not going to be true to who they are. So you might get some pushback or some rub and things like that. So when I'm talking about the X and X and the X and Y chromosomes, yes, in science, that tells you the difference between boys and girls. However, we're all different and we carry different types of energy within us. For instance, if you are more masculine, you have more hunter traits, meaning you are more liable to take more risks. You're also you have a stronger sense of instincts, and you just know when danger is close because of the amount of risks that you exposed yourself to. Your body starts to pick up on all that, and because of survival and replication, it stores that away for your survival so you can help yourself and others survive. Now, if you are more feminine, you have more of a higher emotional quotient, meaning you are higher in EQ, meaning you understand emotions very well. Some of you may be empaths and things like that. And you also have this ability to have some type of higher intuition, or some people might call it a sixth sense, right? You might have the ability to just be like, oh, I got bad vibes from this person. I don't feel like they're right there. Their energy is off, or whatever terminology you want to use. Now, I think it's interesting that in scripture or in the Bible, it states that the man would plow the field, and then we have an X and Y chromosome. Because if we look at the letter Y, it kind of looks like a plow that is used to plow a field. I mean, in a stick form fashion, right? So if you were drawing a stick figure or trying to draw a plow, you would have the barrel or the weight that would go here. Then you would have the handle, so on and so forth. And then you would have the plow, and I'm just going to make this look like this for now, that would tilt the earth. So it would break up the dirt, so on and so forth, so you can plant seeds. Now, if you're looking at biology between men and women, you know that it's the man that plants the seed. That's how babies are born. If you don't understand that, that'll be a different video, and we'll tap on that in another time frame. But for right now, I just wanted you to see how all these things start to connect little by little if you shift your perspective and your perception and learn to see things in more than just one way. So going forward, you have the X and X chromosome. Now, yes, why is the X and X chromosome there? Well, if you were playing baseball, you would have your strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, or if you were playing bowling, you have your strike, so on and so forth, and that normally looks like an X. And in scripture, the woman got in trouble twice. 1 for disobeying, 2 for listening and still disobeying and tricking the husband. Long story. I may be a little incorrect there. However, I do know it was 2 accounts, whereas the man had 1 account. So there's the 1X, and then he was told to plow. There's the Y that looks like a plow for tilting the earth. So you have to understand these dynamics, and that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, well, he's just trying to separate everything. No. Remember, I also talked about energy. Now, we do have masculine and feminine energy, and that also balances out. However, we get trained because of how we look to act a certain way to make other people feel better. And it's not because you're not trying to be true to yourself. You're trying to, but other people don't like it, so you conform and adapt so that you could fit in, because it's a type of form of survival that your body already knows to do. If I can't fit in and survive here, I might perish. So let me adapt, change, hide, etc., instead of coming out and explaining exactly what it is that they're feeling, that they want to say, that they don't want to say, that they are attracted to, or whatever the case. And that fear and everything else builds up, and it creates a lot of psychological problems, believe it or not. So, you have people that have an issue with their identity. They don't know what's going on and things like that. And this is one of the reasons why I started C.L.A.S.S, and I'm going to get into that moving forward. So let's talk about how do I say this? Interpersonal communication. So when it comes to interpersonal communication, this is an area that dictates that about 85 to 90% of all human communication is nonverbal. So if it's nonverbal, then what is it that we are actually paying attention to? And this is where your brain starts to separate between the conscious part and the unconscious part. And this is where people also get you in conversation. They say, I don't think you're conscious, or I don't think you're awake or woke or aware. These are different words that they would utilize to talk about consciousness and unconsciousness. Yes, you walk into a room, but are you able to read the room? Or do you just go in there hoping that you will have a different experience with every person? You really don't do your research. You kind of just take everybody for how it is. And you don't give yourself a competitive advantage when it comes to working your way into the room and fitting in while still being whom you are. So when you're looking at communication, it's more about the nonverbal cues and your tone. How something is said, pretty much, i.e. the mood, that's what gives it away, right? The tone. You ever heard, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? And that's interesting because tone and the sounds of communication also carry a pitch, like music and everything else, right? So you have pitch and you have tone, and that dictates the behavior of the person that you're speaking to. So that's one way, and that's only 10%. That's the verbal, direct way of saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, etc., blah, 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 blah. Now, what is it that you are saying? See, because words can make someone, as they say by Stephen Furtick, words can make someone stronger. And he used this example, I think with his wife or something like that. And she gave him a compliment while he was taking groceries out of the car. And she was like, wow, babe, you're so strong. How did you do that? Oh, he goes, girl, I'll carry more. Hold on, check this out. Let me carry all these bags in. You know, that one trip that you want to make, but sometimes you got to go back to the car. He was touching on that, but it's very true because words of encouragement, motivation, inspiration, can affect someone. If you're familiar with E equals mc squared, Albert Einstein's theory of special relativity, E is energy, mass is, well, how much matter something has and contains, which is what we are, and combination with C, which represents light. So this was also in my last lesson. And if you haven't seen it, please, by all means, go ahead, because class is essentially about creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality, bringing it all together and showing you how it fits. So when one mass with light, because you need light to see, speaks to another mass, so this is mc squared. So I'm now speaking to you on the other side of this camera. That is a form that is called communication. Now, the energy that is put out by me also gets you to put out energy, right? So I tell people in life, and I'm going to get to this later, but you have to learn how to receive things and then go with the flow, as they say, or understand the flow of energy that is being brought out. If somebody walks into a room and they're just like, yeah, blah, 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 you could tell that you probably should either bring them up or ask them what's going on, because the cues are there. If somebody walks in, it's like, yo, baby, I just closed this. This is going to be awesome. I just got a new business, this, that, and the third. The energy is different and it makes you act a certain way. So these are the things that I'm referring to when it comes to interpersonal communications and seeing in between, because let's face it, 85% of the things that we are saying are not coming out of our mouth, if that makes sense. It's our body language, it's our facial twitches, it's our hand movements, it's whether or not you're showing an open palm, a closed fist, if you're holding something, or if you're trying to hide something, what do you do and does it look natural? And this, I'm speaking from my magic background. Di Vernon once said, if you're going to perform, you want to make sure you also perform in front of children because their eyes are more keen. Meaning that after a while, adults kind of fall into this psychological fallacy where they just take things as they are or judge a book by its cover. Whereas children are a little bit more curious, so they go and investigate a little bit more and they pay attention very closely. So if you could get by with them, you can go ahead and get by with adults because, well, adults are normally more distracted than children, even though people don't like to agree with it. Because if a child is interested in something, then they will go ahead and provide focus to that topic, subject, or whatever. Now, moving forward, it's interesting when it comes to communication because even in the medical field, there's a discrepancy, right? And if you don't remember my last video, I talked about the symbols in the medical community, or if you've seen my other videos, symbols in the medical community. And one of the things that I noticed is that on the ambulance that goes around is the scepter of Asclepius, which is a scepter with one single snake going around, so on and so forth. Dr. Jordan Peterson actually talked about this, and it talks about how, you know, a little bit of poison can go ahead and help you defend yourself against other poisons. In other words, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, type of thing. Question though, when you go to the hospital, there's another symbol, but it has two snakes wrapped around with the wings on top. And that is completely different than the medical symbol. That one comes from, well, thieves, traitors, commerce, etc. My question to you is, well, why is that there at the hospital? Makes no sense to me, but they do make their money. So I give my shout out to the first responders, but the ones in the hospital, they got to learn some of their research and what their logo and symbol means, because I've asked doctors, I've asked nurses, I even asked people in the ambulance. I was talking to people. I said, do you know what that symbol means? That's the symbol of a true healer. What they have at the hospital, I have no idea why they are reflecting that. I don't know, because it deals with that and they make a lot of money or whatever the case. They adapted it because it looked better. It was more symmetrical, but it doesn't stand true to what it is that it's supposed to be. And so with that, you know, you have to understand that the symbol in the hospital is the scepter of Hermes, which is completely different than the Asclepius. And so the opinion of design and the snakes and the meaning, the snake was known as a symbol of knowledge, right? However, when it comes to the other things, from my understanding, I'm looking at it from the symbol for both wisdom and medicine, which is one of the representations of the snakes, where associating with both healing and poison. However, reflecting to, let's say, have you ever seen the show The Good Doctor? Right? And then you've heard of the phrase, a snake oil salesman. Nobody really knows why people are going to certain places. Maybe they might have a drug addiction. Maybe they overdose. Maybe they got into a car accident, whatever the case. However, it is up to the doctors and the ambulances, first of all, the ambulance, to get you there alive and do proper treatment and critical care so that when you get to a stabilized environment, such as a hospital, they could go ahead and then do their trial and error and test their hypotheses during their diagnostics. So that's one of the things that you have to look at when I'm talking about seeing in between, right? Because yes, it's easy to pump somebody full of medicine and things like that, but what is it that they're actually trying to understand? And that comes back to communication. And if you're incapacitated, you have to pay attention to the interpersonal communications that people give off, which is 85% of how we communicate anyways. You know, it's very difficult, and people don't realize this until they have a child and they have to raise a child for the first 2 years, and it doesn't even know the language you speak. So you have to go off of interpersonal communication, because that's also how the baby is coming off of, you know, and working with you and communicating with you. A baby doesn't say, hey, pick me up. No, they're old enough to speak. They'll go like this with their hands and they'll reach up for you. Hey, pick me up, pick me. And you know that means that they want you to pick them up. It's a universal language. I mean, you could go to almost any country, and if a baby is used to seeing that or doing that, they'll mimic it over and over again to let you know what they want. I want this, or this sign language for food or more, and so on and so forth. And these are things that are nonverbal. It's not only until later in development that you understand these things. So take that with a grain of salt the next time you go out in public. The next time, if you're a healthcare professional, you're trying to communicate to somebody, try actually understanding what it is that they're saying, and stop listening to just the 10% of words that they barely don't even understand themselves. So when we move forward to this, I want to talk about the purpose of CLASS and, well, the acronym itself. Well, in elementary school, middle school and high school, you learn about creativity and logic, right? And then when you go to college, you graduate with either your not your associates, your bachelor's in the arts or sciences area. And then lastly, when you, let's say, get out of college, experience life for a little bit, get around some hippies or whatever, you start thinking about spirituality. And now with spirituality, and I don't know if you guys can see this because of the light, but with spirituality, it's very interesting because they're all saying the same thing. It's just a little different along the way, right? And so that's some of the things I want to get into because all this connects together. However, nobody actually really asked the question, how or why does it do that? Because we're a living reflection of our own universe, right? If you remember from one of my videos, I put the word Earth on there, and I, purposefully took the H and I moved an H to the front. I left both H's there on purpose because if you look up the definition of the word, it talks about a fire, a burning passion, or so on and so forth, or a place where a fire dwells. And if you talk about spirituality, motivation, and things like that, they talk about the fire inside, so on and so forth. But isn't it ironic that if you were to move the H to the front of Earth, it spells heart for a reason? Isn't it weird and ironic that there's 11 organs in the body that are mainly used for the system of the body? And there's also 7 continents, and you have your oceans that add up to 11 because we reflect one another? Think about it. So the purpose of C.L.A.S.S is one, to create a community of people that want to find meaning or understand more in the world, but to give people a different point of view, utilizing and changing and adapting some of their perceptions and perspectives on things so that they could see the world and people in a more beautiful way, as I would say. Because let's just face it, negativity is everywhere. You can walk out the door and find negativity. The hard thing to do is to find the beauty through the pain. And that's one of the things that this is about. Plus the last 2 S's. And I'll get into that. So one of the things I want to tap onto is, if for those of you who don't know, I'm former military, and I've had a lot of people in my life. It sounds horrible, but I've had a couple people, I would say close to about 8 or 9, take their own life. And so this is where I talk about the last 2 S's, right? Science and spirituality. Now, there is a program called Mission 22, and Mission 22 helps out with this. Or have you ever heard of the 22 push-ups a day? Things like that. Yes, there's more than 22 events happening per day, but on average, it gets it out. However, if I were to write the S and S just like this, it means nothing. That's spirituality and science, right? Or it could stand for Stop Suicide, right? Or it could stand for, if you watch anime, Soul Society, right? If you watch Bleach. However, if I were to invert this and change the perspective, it can look like 22, right? So therefore, this is a play on everything to bring everything together for you, because this is called seeing in between. But you will only understand this if you understand lesson 1 about perspective and perception. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this was to not only create a community, but to let people know that they can talk and be open about whatever it is that they want to talk about without having the fear of somebody treating them a certain way, or automatically calling law enforcement, ambulances, saying you're crazy, all these other things. Get it off your chest, because at the end of the day, I can tell you what, freedom is not free, and your freedom of speech is not what you think it is. So hope you're still with me. We're about 18 minutes in. And if you do like this video, if you do like the lessons that are coming, so on and so forth, please, by all means, subscribe. It's really helpful that not only you subscribe, but you share these videos with others, so we could not only change their perspective and perceptions of the world, but we could show them how to navigate through the negativity and see the beauty in life. Thank you for that. Now that I'm off my soapbox, let's break down class as it relates to people, because I studied a lot. I've studied people for more than 20 years now. And there's classes, it's a built-up entendre acronym. So the C, if we're talking from a psychological standpoint, if we're dealing with the last 2 S's, right? The first thing you want to do is check, right? So C, this would be conditioned, right? Have they been conditioned to act a certain way? Or can this person show compassion or concern for others? This would check their cognitive function if you're studying psychology. So when you're testing cognitive function, you want to know, was this person groomed? Were they conditioned? Can you break the behavior and the habit and the pattern that became the gospel truth for them? Look into that. Another thing would be L, right? L, this is where the question lies in. Have they been shown love? Love meaning an acronym, right? So not just the word love, but love being an acronym. And what that means is, to me, this is what I came up with, is do they choose life over vicious emotions? Normally, when people are doing self-harm, they've experienced so many vicious emotions thrown at them, they just decided to give up. It's a form of learned helplessness. And now, if you're studying psychology or wellness, this would check somebody's emotional wellness. So this is something that you would also want to pay attention to for others that are around you that are maybe going down this path, or you can see certain things aren't adding up, they're acting weird, so on and so forth, etc. So again, I'll reiterate. C is conditioned, or can or does the person show compassion or concern for others? That's their cognitive function. So can they show compassion to an animal? Can they show compassion and love to a stranger, so on and so forth? Or are they very judgmental and they start doing all these different things to get people away from them? L, have they been shown love? Acronym. Do they choose life over vicious emotions? If you're writing this down, by all means, life over vicious emotions. That's the acronym of love. If they have, then therefore they have learned helplessness. If they, I should say, let me take that back. If they haven't, I should say, chosen love, right? And they learned learned helplessness, right? Self-helplessness. And they were conditioned that way. That means not only did they cave in onto the vicious emotions and everything else that was thrown their way, they just gave up. And the easiest thing to do when you give up is to, well, quit. And in life, you don't want to quit, but the only way you get further is you have to realize that this is a team effort and team sport. And the only way you work on a team is with other individuals. And wherever more than one is gathered, there he will be. So let's talk about that, right? Last one would be A. Are there actions/behaviors that they're showing or say mean that, are they trying to seek attention, or are they actually trying to reach out for help? So I'll reiterate that. So what do their actions/behaviors show or say to you? Again, what do their actions or behaviors show or say to you? Having this understanding, being a studious person, understanding that interpersonal communication, or communication in general, 80% of it is nonverbal. This is something that you would have to pay attention to. So this will also check their behavioral wellness and function and things like that if you are studying psychology. And in that sector, that's the three areas that you normally want to check is, well, their behavioral area, their emotional wellness, as well as their cognitive function, because they might have something wrong with their brain. And you have to be careful because it does take a while to figure out what it is that's wrong with an individual. If they're trying to diagnose someone with bipolar disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia, depression, and whatever the case may be, that takes time. You can't just go in 15 minutes and be like, oh, that person's this. It's difficult to do that because you don't know what other influences are there in their life, in their body, and everywhere else, and around them that keep coming back. So you have to pay attention in more ways than one. That's why I talk about the last two S's, because science can only go but so far, but the spiritual world and the spiritual community is everywhere, baby. So when I say things like that, this is why I say that the S and the S have to work together, right? This is what school and class is all about. If you're living on this planet, a group of fish is called a school. And what is taught in school but class? This is where this whole premise came from. And last time I checked, Peter was a fisherman. And in the Bible, it says we will be a fisher of men. Hue means color. Man is what you are. So if you have a racist bone in your body, remember this. If you've gotten married before and you bought a diamond ring, you spent money on an expensive rock that its value, one of the ways you determine its value is if you are able to shine light through it, and it displays and fragments all the colors of light through it, which is called your clarity. This is what drives value, but you don't see the value in the other colors of the freaking rainbow or a bag of Skittles because your perception, the intrinsic value is not there for you. So this is what I mean by the S and S have to work together, because S also contains psychology, contains science, and contains medicine, so on and so forth. But the things you cannot measure, control, or even begin to have a hypothesis on, sorry, I was thinking mathematics. It's very difficult for that world to come into play because people are always trying to control it, because people want, at the end of the day, and this is the purpose of science, to have power and control in their life. The only reason why a lot of people have issues with spirituality is because, well, you can't control it, measure it, test it, and know how to counteract it and defend yourself against it when it comes down to it, like science does. It's different, but you have to work together in order to get everyone ahead. Because the last thing that sucks is trying to say all these things about somebody and then not getting to say the good things at the end, at the funeral, and then all of a sudden all the good things want to start coming out. Why is that? Why not now? Why not the good things now? Why not say the compliment now? Negativity already outweighs the bad, so why not shift your perspective and your perceptions and your vocabulary and words to encourage, motivate, and inspire people to do something more, be something better? These are the things that, I have a lot of rub on with people, because some people just don't care. See, my time in the military, I had to care. See, I went in older. I got put in charge of people that came out of high school, and they were the children of other people that I didn't know. And I was playing with and managing, explosives and ammunitions. And if you think I'm going to let your child just run out there and play with bombs and everything like that, you're out of your mind. Because in my profession, I have to get things done right the first time. It's not like in business where you can just fire somebody and hire the next one, or other things in life where you can just quit and move on. Life and death are very real, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking from my standpoint, my perspective, and my background, and others who have, suffered or seen others suffer through this, it's a challenge for them, because how do you get accepted in a world that has no idea what your world is like? It's different. This is why they have to work together. So let's move forward. Let's talk about the difference in language and culture. The United States still has to learn what others already know, because a lot of people say, Mike, that's great. Class, that's a nice play on words, etc. I like how you have the creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality in there. But what about other languages and around the world? Glad you asked, because in other languages, including German, Spanish, and so on and so forth, there's an E at the end. And haven't you noticed that other countries are more emotionally adapt to certain things because their language is more specific? Using Latin, if it ends in an A, it must be feminine. If it ends in an O, it must be masculine. So they have a better understanding of emotions, and they spell class, Klasse. Even in German, the K, which also begins with creativity, or is in the beginning of the word creativity in German. And the only reason why I mentioned German is because of the Gutenberg press, right? The printing press, Gutenberg Bible, everybody's heard of it. So other places, other countries are more adept and more aware about emotions than here, but yet everybody has an issue. Everybody's heard of the resting face, right? The resting pompous face, whatever you want to call it. However, it's interpersonal communication that got you to understand that, because they didn't have to say anything to you. They just had to posture a certain way. So this is something that people have to understand. So if we're talking about seeing in between, I'm going to go to the Catholic Church for a second. Let's go ahead and get rid of this right here, because I want to make sure that you guys see this, and I want to put it high enough so that everybody is able to see what it is that I'm stating. So the Catholic Church, a long time ago, they used to have what's known as a papal state, right? Eventually, over time, that became people, right? And people, the way I look at it, because I was actually at the Billy Graham Museum with my mother, and there's a word painted on the wall, said people. It was a phrase. And I said, hey, Mom, check this out. Because in Catholic school, they emphasize something called wordplay and knowledge and learning and things like that. And I said, look, check this out. I said, the Pope, P-O-P-E, is supposed to watch over and take care of the people who believe in E and L. El, or El Shaddai, or God, or whatever you want to call it. However, it's the balance between emotion and logic. Because people will act on emotion first and justify with logic later. This is why spirituality doesn't make sense to a lot of people, because it's not logical. This is why they stop at science, because I could touch this. But people have a very easy time understanding that an ice cube can melt into a gas, dry ice, right? And you won't see it. Or electricity is unable to be seen, but if you plug something into a wall, you'll feel it. If you cool down the air, you'll feel it, but you won't see it unless it gets cold enough and you can see your breath. Why is it so hard to believe that you have a spark inside of you that when it leaves your body, you may not see it, just like electricity? I think the biggest fear people have, even though they say they don't fear it, is dying. And the reason why is because they're still searching for something that they feel that hasn't completed them yet, so they're not ready. So when it comes to emotion and logic, you have to understand these things. And now when it comes to understanding words, you got to understand, well, how many ways can you see that word? What does it actually mean? Because if I was in the UK, I could say I'm going to go outside and smoke a FAG, right? However, if I say that over here in the United States, people get offended. But that's a cigarette over there. So you have to understand the terminology, and the words that you're using only have meaning and get you upset because of the meaning you assign to it, or the meaning that someone taught you to assign to it. So definitely look into it. Definitely acknowledge the fact that we all don't know very much about a lot, but as a collective, we know a lot about a lot, right? I may not know about a lot of things in science, chemistry, physics, so on and so forth. But I know if I got around the right people, they can teach me, they can show me, they can educate me on the things that I would need to know in order to be more successful. So when we're talking about communication in general, I tell people you have to learn how to expand your mind, right? Expand. Be open, right? Then when people say something, you want to contract a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and do this little symbol here. So when somebody's talking to you and they're feeding you something, you want to expand and let that come in. But then let it sit and start to contract, and that's going to build up energy. This is called your processing time, right? Or when you receive information, it's like, oh, that sounds good, and you're trying to figure out what to say. That's your contraction. And then you want to release. You want to play like a catch and pitch baseball, right? So they're going to come in, they're going to say something to you, you're going to receive it, it's going to go through your cerebellum and everything else, and then you're going to say something back, and that's going to trigger them to go ahead and engage with you. This is interesting because not only is this the symbol of infinity, but we talked about it earlier in earlier lessons. And if you're looking at stuff and you're looking at, well, the ways things can be perceived, right? This looks very interesting. However, let me see if you guys can see this. Yeah. If I were to say you need to see better, right? And we were getting into spirituality or whatever, and I were to draw a J hook, right? So if I draw a J hook like this, it means nothing. It really doesn't. Now, until you hold a mirror up to it. When you hold a mirror up to it, you get this two J's looking at each other, right? Or E equals MC squared, because it's an image bouncing back of a mass, right? Two images squared that is giving energy or telling you something, which is a form of energy. So, what does this and the top part have in common? Well, if I push them together, right, it's only going to create, well, somewhat of a polarity, right? It's not going to go anywhere. But if I alter the conversation, let's say I'm having with somebody, to lift them higher, I can then now come up this way. And if this person does the same thing, or if they're on a low, I can bring them up, right? So now I can now see how it comes together. But the only way you're going to understand this is if I give you more of a visual, right? Because it's kind of like this ring here, right? It's a circle, but if you keep going in a circle, you're going to end up nowhere, right? If I were to expand, I'm going to come closer here. If I were to expand this ring, right? If I were to expand it out and twist it once, you will get the same thing. And this is where communication comes into play, right? Even with yourself. If you keep saying the same thing and doing the same thing over and over again, it's the definition of insanity. However, if you change it, or if you, as they say, let's twist again, right? The song, as we did last summer. I don't know if you guys are old school like me, but I love that. Or in marketing, it's called spin, right? If we were just to spin or twist that circle, that loop, whatever, one time, it would create an affinity symbol. Now, here's the best part. If I were to close these or fold them over, it creates, well, a loop. Again, it creates this loop. Now, if all things are good, right? Let me erase this real quick. Now, if everything is good, right? Let's spell it. G, O, and O, and a D. Well, that makes somewhat of a sense, right? Because it's good, but it has the affinity and then the D. But what happens if I got rid of one, right? We got the G, but now we have the symbol, and there's a fine line that you should not cross, right? Now that spells God. Interesting how that works when you change your perception and your perspectives about the world and the things that you are seeing. Because in the beginning, anybody who's a historian will tell you we started to communicate with images first before we had the written language. That's why in caves and the hieroglyphics and everything else exists, because the written word, even 30,000 years ago, it was more easier to understand something through image and visuals than to have actual words. This is why music is so impressive, because the way I'm using my voice right now is the same way a singer can conduct a beautiful song, or a conductor can go ahead and make a symphony with an orchestra by the waving of his magic wand. Think Fantasia, Mickey Mouse, whatever, and he's conducting the orchestra, so on and so forth, and he has the wizard hat, and he's going, and boom, now you go, and you go, and you go, and he's directing everything, but in his mind, it's one sound. And that's somewhere you have to, I would strongly suggest people try to get there, because what's happening, and I'm starting to see it more and more with society, especially after COVID, is people are trying to block out the noise. They don't really care about it anymore. They don't even want to communicate with other people anymore. And so therefore, they don't know how to conduct anymore, right? Before COVID, people were complaining that they wanted to spend more time with their kids and all this other stuff, work from home. Coronavirus, COVID, whatever you want to call it, came around, and all of a sudden they got what they asked for, but then they really didn't like it. Oh, someone send these kids back to school. Oh, I can't stand working from home, and all the complaints. And I can tell you what, you can ask for a lot of things in the world, and just like with money, the more you make, the more you'll find out how to spend it. Just like with time, the more you get of it, the more you'll find out how to waste it. So these are things that I want you to look into, because if you don't, then there's going to be problems in a rocky road. However, if you work with a team, if you're in this group and community, if you're following me right now on social, by all means, follow me on everywhere. YouTube, Instagram, I'm always throwing things up everywhere. Mainly on TikTok and Instagram, because it has a longer short or reel section. And I know people are normally pressed for time and they want, quick information very fast. So they'll see clips of this video or clips of other videos. But YouTube is where I put my long form content, mainly class, which will eventually go into a private program where I would coach people. And I think it's going to not only be beneficial, but help people see things differently, because just like this just went from good to God, because God is good all the time, right? At least that's how that phrase goes, right? And then, of course, we use the infinity symbol, and we talked about how that is also connected to, well, this ring right here. Some of you would get married and put the same ring on your finger. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, look, if I ever get married, this is what I'm going to probably do: work on interpersonal communication skills when I'm upset with my significant other. I'd say, look, I still love you, but this ring right here is going to go on this finger right here because I'm getting upset and some words are going to come out of my mouth. I still love you. I got the ring. I just moved it over a little bit just because I'm giving you a warning that I might say some things that you are not going to like, or I might curse a little bit. Or as they say, if you have the ability to say F you every once in a while, why not go ahead and say it? It makes people feel good, right? Don't get offended when somebody's tonality, their pitch goes a little bit higher than an octave that you're not ready to ingest because you don't want to ingest it. If you're truly there to help, if you're truly wanting to help somebody, don't try to just listen, try to understand, because at the end of the day, there are three things people want. They want to be listened to, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood, otherwise felt, right? So they want to be felt, heard, and understood. And if you can understand that, if you could truly understand that people want to be felt, heard, and understood, your conversations will be out of this world with so many people that it will not only change your life, but I have a small little funny hunch that you will begin to change the lives of those that you interact with. So last but not least, I will leave you with this. This is lesson 3 of, well, class. And the last time I had C cubed, well, C cubed, right? Because I think it's C2, right? 2 to C last time. But the Trinity, right? Which we tapped onto, the Holy Trinity. You could talk about the knot, the Trinity knot. You could also talk about the matrix with Trinity, right? But normally when somebody, the two become one and have a baby, that's 3. So I hope this leaves you seeing a little bit more in between, because it always starts in the gym. It always starts in the beginning. And sometimes you can only connect the dots looking back. Thank you so much for listening to lesson 3 of class. And I can't wait for lesson 4. I know this took a while, and that was because I had some issues going on in my personal life, but I'm going to get back on the ball rolling. And so next week, I promise you that lesson 4 will be coming out. I'm not going to release the title. Okay, maybe I will. I'm going to try to come around with something like how to listen to understand. I think that'll be a good one. So till next time, my friends, take care. God bless, and I will see you on the next lesson. Goodbye, class.